You can see that the bands there are agricultural land. So these are communities of, say, for argument's sake, 50,000 people. So you get a footy team and a retail centre, agricultural land. You've preserved the habitat, which is this darker green, and then there's a transport system network to that. You can zoom in a bit, and I guess this image is trying to say, well, why can't we now build innovative clusters of development? I mean, we need to. We need to increase the performance of our development. So that's what this is indicating. And that's something the Minister's cottoned onto with his supertown notion of supertowns. This is our Minister for Regional Development, Brendan Grills. I haven't had time to Photoshop his head into that image, but we will do that. I've listed more towns there than are actually classified as supertowns, but I think it was a stroke of genius, personally, to start saying that word. Except for the problem that it implies there'll be winners and losers. So there's going to be a lot of politicking around distribution and so on. But I think just these things are interesting. Just the idea and the word, it suddenly put a bit of a buzz in the air. And of course serious money is now flowing in these directions. And what we're doing is we're looking at the current status of these towns. We're looking at their environmental limits, we're looking at their predicted population growth, we're looking at their economic bases, and we're putting all those things together to try and get an objective view of what kind of potential does a place like Northam really have, or Karratha, or Katanning, or Jurien Bay. What sort of people would really want to go and settle there and build families and I think that's a very interesting thing that is going on in Western Australia at the moment. It's, as I say, it's not just mad development, it's a very creative socio-political experiment, really. It's not new. I put this image in just to remind you that it's not a new idea. This is near Birmingham in England. And it's the old, it was built by George Cadbury's chocolate, in 1893. And he built the factory, and then of course built the community, so all his workers would live in a nice garden city and be able to more or less walk to work. And it's still a strong community with 6,500 jobs still tied to the Cadbury's Bourneville chocolate factory. And I guess that's what we're looking at in Western Australia in terms of, company towns almost. That's not unusual in the Pilbara, but down in the southwest it's somewhat unusual. So how we encourage immigration, industry and so on to distribute itself and find opportunities in these areas is very interesting. Now, I don't want to take too long because it's a weeknight. The question then for the Australian cities, and I want to get down to Perth a little bit, is to sprawl or not to sprawl. That's the kind of because each Australian city is facing big numbers in terms of its growth. Each city is having the same struggle. Should we continue to expand with what we call greenfield development, new suburbs, or should we try and get people to live in higher density apartments and so on within the existing footprint of the city? Now, what has happened is everyone's agreed. Every Australian city and all the planners agree we can't sprawl too much further. So therefore, all the policy in the nation encourages infill development. In Brisbane, it's 88%. They're saying they're going to have 88% of all their development will be infill, apartments and higher density living. Sydney's 90% because Sydney's got nowhere to go. Can't go over the Blue Mountains. It's got a national park north and south. No one's going to bulldoze those. So Sydney's in trouble. It's got a little bit of land left, which is a remnant food bowl, and they're about to put suburbs on that, which is a silly thing to do because you're pouring bloody concrete on your cornflakes, effectively. We're the same as Melbourne. Either Melbourne's copying us or we're copying Melbourne. And we're saying 53% of all growth in Perth will be suburban greenfield development. So half of it. The other half is going to be infill development. And this is where things get interesting politically and architecturally and so on, and will interest you because of your area is targeted for significant infill growth, infill development. I'll come back to that momentarily. Now the problem has been for us that we can never achieve these targets. Alana McTiernan had a target of 60% infill The Libs have dropped it a bit to 47. I don't think you'll get 47. I'll just jump that. I don't think you'll get 47 because Perth typically sprawls. And I'll show you why in a minute. This is Perth historically. You can see what it's done. It's just spread outwards. It will continue to do so largely, in my view. Oh, this is interesting. You can see Perth scaled to other cities around the world. So we are actually the most sprawled city on earth. For the least number of people, we're the biggest city on earth. Perth is huge. I mean, there's London, 14 million. It's smaller than Perth in all dimensions. My personal favourite is Taipei. Look down here. It's as big as Netherlands. 7 million people. You know, we've really spread out. We've just gone, okay, look at all this space. Let's go. It's fantastic, you know. It's fantastic if you've got cars running on cheap fuel and you can chase those suburbs with jobs, to a degree. Yeah, otherwise it just doesn't work. Now, here are the numbers we're dealing with in Perth. 4.2 million by mid-century. That's an extra 2.7 million homes. An extra 2.7 million people. So over 1 million freestanding homes in suburbs, or close to 1.5 million apartments. And you can break that down to the ratio of where the government policy is 47% will be freestanding homes, and 53% will be freestanding homes, and 47% will be infill. This is why I don't think we're going to reach that target in Perth. The red is the current size of the city. That's 100,000 hectares. The blue is stuff that we're currently building. And it's all, you can see, it's all on the edge of the city. It's pejoratively referred to as sprawl. It's the black stuff you've got to worry about if you don't like sprawl. Because that's the land we have in our land bank. It's classified as rural land. It's degraded rural land, largely. And you can bet your bottom dollar that that's what the developers are buying up as we speak. Now just look graphically at it. See, the red is what we are. The black is what we've got. You could double the red into the black. So we haven't been looking at that, and I'll show you. We've then looked at it more carefully and said, don't knock over a single tree. Just, you know, be very careful, and you end up with still 118,000 hectares of land, and the city is currently 100,000 hectares, so you can double it into that land. It mightn't make a good city, but the land is there. Now, here's the catch, though. The catch is, it's zoned rural land. This is P.L. Harvey going right down. We can also unpick that. That's not the Great Wall of China. That's just a rural mountain range. It's just a planning line. We can unpick that and it can continue to go further and north. The catch is that the black land coincides with this beige stuff, which is multiple use wetlands. Which means if you get a shovel and put it into the ground, you'll hit water about 1 metre down. Okay? And that land gets, people think Perth is dry. It's actually very, very wet, full of wetlands and low-lying land. We've built on all the pretty stuff up there, and now we're pushing down into this low-lying wet country and rolling out suburbs. So you're rolling out suburbs into low amenity landscape with a high water table. You're not sure if you can chase those suburbs with jobs. And it's all going to be based on a form of technology called cars, which are running on a fuel that's running out. So we're building, if you do that, you're building a city that, you know, it doesn't sound like the right approach. Now that said, I would have talked much more, had I more time, about how much I love the suburbs and come from the suburbs. But if we're going to build more suburbs, they're going to have to be much smarter than what they are. This is how we build on that low-lying land at the moment. We import, we have to, because you've got to get the land up higher to pour a concrete slab and build your house. We mine yellow sand from one site, and that's what you can see these trucks doing here, and then we dump it on the job there, jack the land up, then you can get it going, because you're legally up above that high water table. This is what Perth, if you want to see Perth, the real Perth, you don't go to Mount Eliza, get a helicopter and go around the edge of the city. That's where it's at. That's what's happening. And this is what it typically looks like. And it is interesting that, you know, you could start a suburb for 40,000 people tomorrow and no one would blink. And as I mentioned before, I talk about a 4-storey building in Cottesloe and, you know, all hell will break loose. This is the problem, because we're just chewing into that landscape, which to the untrained eye, let's say, doesn't look like a very appealing landscape. You know, it's scratchy and fire-prone, full of snakes, and suburbs want green and pools and shade and deciduous trees. So they're two totally antithetical worlds. My own view is if you're going to build suburbs, you need to try and build them at higher density. That's what this drawing is saying. These higher density, instead of smearing suburbs over the entire landscape, build at higher density. You might get some better urban character out of that. Save all the habitat, and then start working that landscape as food production and water retention, and look after the wetlands, and, you know, try to live with this particular place. This is a different version of that where we've used a transport system. I've got a transport system on an 800-metre grid, so no one's further than a 5-minute walk from hopping on public transport. Build higher density around that, and then the public open space in the middle is proportionally enough to more or less feed these people. We've tried to balance it out in terms of water harvesting, food production and public transport and density. Now, I'm about to end. This is where we're at now with the current policy. We've got 47% of the growth hovering over Perth. 47% of our 2.7 million people. You know, it's an awful lot of apartments. When you take it, except that 50% is going to be greenfield suburban sprawl into that black land I showed you. The question then is, and this is incidentally, this is those future people if they were living like Parisians in 5-storey buildings. It's about that big, scaled to, there's the Swan River, South Perth and the CBD. Now we've got to try and get that on the ground. So what the government is asking you to do is accept distribution of those numbers. They're dealing with smaller numbers, but it's the same principle. Accept distribution of that hovering mass through various parts of the existing fabric of the city. And that amounts to our current policy known as Directions 31. Every dot you see on this drawing of Perth represents hotspots, places where we are trying to achieve increased density. And that is a very interesting project. It's diagrammatically, it's a bit like that, where we're trying to shut down this, not shut down, but make the city a more resilient network of trade and communication. It doesn't just keep on sprawling outwards. To a degree, we can consolidate what we've got and build on our existing infrastructure. Now, typically, communities that are facing that kind of growth are suspicious. They're suspicious of the stereotype of the, you know, the greedy developer, the arrogant architect, the expedient, cynical politician. Personally, I don't think those people exist in such large numbers as many think they do. I think most people are trying to do the right thing. And what's facing us all as a community in this city is how do we now build a city that preserves the suburbs we enjoy and we've grown up in, but we also have areas of higher density. And that's what we're trying to, you know, that's what the project will be outside your front door over the next few decades. Can we do that well? So people love the place, create a stronger sense of community, reduce the domination of cars, you know, make developments that are aesthetic, and people can enjoy living in and realise some of the virtues of living in higher density. Not everyone's going to like it, but the point is that in our life, over the life cycle of an Australian, you want different things at different ages, you know, and at the moment we don't have much choice. Perth is pretty much a monoculture. Whereas you know, when I'm 20, I want a certain kind of lifestyle in a certain environment. 30, 50, 70, it's all different. We should be able to provide that diversity now throughout the fabric of our city. So I'll leave you with this question because this is not your neck of the woods, but it's similar. If, you know, we go out the front there, it's a pretty tough environment. And it's very much the sort of environment that cars made for themselves while we weren't looking. And the question now is, how do we retrofit those places which we use as service hubs? Now, we designed these places for cars, for getting in and getting out, and we go back to our nice suburban environments. The challenge for us all now is to get into these tough bits of country and rebuild them so that they become the hearts of new communities. So I'll leave you on that, because that's the challenge you're facing, and I'll leave it right there. Thank you very much.